Other developments around that. The SAPS say they're making sure there's no violence after the elections. There are reports today that police have actually sent officers to certain hotspots in certain places, particularly, I presume, KwaZulu-Natal, after the comments by former President Jacob Zuma on Saturday night. Zuma said the results should not be proclaimed, that to proclaim the results would be a provocation. As you know, last night the Electoral Commission went ahead and proclaimed the election results. Then, speaking outside court, as Karinda Jagmahan was covering for you, Jacob Zuma again suggesting that the elections had been stolen. Again, no evidence being provided of his claim. He also did say that his supporters must not use violence. Tebogo Khaas is the founder of Public Interest SA. Tebogo, good evening. You were watching things play out on Saturday night. Former President Zuma saying that to proclaim the election would be a provocation. How do you react? How do you feel about what he said?
And then he went on to want to disrupt the president as the president was making an address around the elections. Look, what former President Zuma is doing is really abhorrent, and it's very shameful. But he's beyond shame, so I don't think shame is part of his DNA anymore or at all. And to actually make the kind of threats of violence if he doesn't get things his way is something that we should have actually anticipated, and something we would anticipate even if a revote was to be conducted again and the results remain the same or worse for him.
So in other words, from what you're suggesting, is people shouldn't give in to the threat of violence?
Not at all. And I'm happy that the IEC took the position that they did. In fact, they called his bluff, and when he was demanding that they don't go ahead and make the announcement, and the IEC played by the book. They followed every part of the law where they're empowered or entitled to make the kind of pronouncement that they did in terms of releasing the results and making those announcements that they did. Because to do otherwise and to submit to the whims of a constitutional delinquent, as Jacob Zuma is, would have been a fallacy and a travesty of justice.
So what should happen then? I mean, how does well, let me go back a little bit, because there is an argument to say that the Electoral Commission could have lost nothing by waiting a day or two. I mean, there's an argument against that. I think under the law they have to proclaim the results as soon as reasonably possible, because there is a concern about what happens if you delay the publication of the results. The other parties would think they're being cooked.
Yeah, they could have waited a day or two, but we know that they would have had until Tuesday or Wednesday, I think, in terms of the time frame. For what? What is it that they would have, on what basis? Because there was nobody adduced any evidence of any malfeasance insofar as the elections were concerned, including evidence to extend that they would warrant any such drastic course of action to be taken by the IEC. And of all the complaints that were lodged, I think there were 579 or thereabout, they attended to them before the announcement of the results. So what would have changed? Would it be that they would give MK and Zuma enough chance to go and create more evidence or proof of when it doesn't exist? And what would happen if still after 2 days later they still say, no, we can't find, there's nothing tangible that they can work on to warrant any changes? And I don't think the IEC was obstinate because in its position, because what it actually did was actually bend over backwards to accommodate, make some condemnation in terms of the time frame within which such objections were to be lodged. And after having exhausted all that, what more needed to be waited? We couldn't just wait on Zuma's whims as to when the announcement this nation was awaiting should be made. Zuma is no longer president, and he cannot rule from the grave, well, the proverbial grave, because despite his terminal illness, he's proven that he's still alive.
Tebogo, underneath all of this, I suppose, is really the fact that in 2021 we saw what happened when Zuma was arrested and sent to jail. And we saw the violence in KwaZulu-Natal. And since then there have been very few prosecutions. There have been one or two. But we still don't quite know exactly how it happened. I mean, the Human Rights Commission made the, frankly, to me, amazing claim that there was no proper link between Zuma going to jail and the violence. And is that really the problem underneath this? If our criminal justice system was working, if there were prosecutions for that, if we knew who had done what, who was, from what we understand, going through the alarm systems at shopping malls and things like that, then we would probably all be in a very different space to where we are now.
The police minister at the time went on record that they knew who that, I think it was 12. They've identified those masterminds, and those masterminds will be behind bars soon. We're here because they failed to act. And because they've been too lenient on the Jacob Zuma's excesses, that is why he becomes even more emboldened. He's a psychopath, a psychopathic narcissist who really doesn't need to be led anywhere closer to the levers of power. And with every day, he gets to prove us correct insofar as us saying they've been very lenient on Zuma, and I think he feels that he can do as he please. In fact, he's even worse than Donald Trump, who recently has threatened that there'll be violence if he was to be jailed, because we know that even what happened after court, he didn't even denounce it after the fact to say, no, this is not my, it's not out of, I do not countenance such conduct. I desist and I disassociate myself from it, because that's what he wants to do, instill fears. He is actually the latter-day manifestation of a then Kachabuthelezi, who instilled fears during the 1994 election and make sure that until he got things his way, he wouldn't want to participate or go ahead peacefully with the elections. Do you think, Tebogo, it would be wrong for any political party to work in a coalition with MK, or should the ANC try and accommodate them in some way? Look, you know, that's why I'm not a politician anymore. I quit active politics 10, 15 years ago during the Gupta eras. But I wouldn't rule it out. But if it was anybody who's sane, they wouldn't keep Jacob Zuma anywhere near, because first of all, he's untrustworthy and he's somebody who's out to wreck the constitution and wreck the democracy. And if ANC really is serious about introspection as well as renewal, they won't go into a coalition with Zuma, because it's a toxic part of the ANC that broke our way to form an NK party. Now you want to still invite it in while you want to win yourself off it. It wouldn't make sense. There are plenty of rules that the ANC could consider, but I suppose they would make the decisions that they believe fits best with their programs as well as their future strategies. Tebogo Khaas, thank you very much for coming in, the founder of Public Interest SA. Well, in a moment, we'll talk more about the two-pot retirement system. It has a fancier name. It's got an amendment in the name, but we will talk more about how the two-pot retirement system is going to affect you. That's next.